Welcome to the Mixology Talk podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Julia, and we're the folks behind abarabove.com.
So I'm the bartending expert behind A Bar Above, and I also work with bars and restaurants to help improve their beverage programs.
And I run our bar tool shop, where I work with Chris, and I chat with customers to create awesome new bar tools, and I also do all of the boring background stuff to make sure that customers get awesome bar tools that they love.
So together we're all about supporting the craft cocktail bartender community as well as enthusiasts. So thanks for joining us.
So you may have noticed things look a little bit different around here. I know that you may remember our beautiful back bar, but what you may not remember is our back bar in fabric form.
Yeah. So the shells aren't this wavy.
No.
And if you're just listening on the podcast, definitely check it out on YouTube. You'll see the kind of a cloth image of our back bar we had printed up before we moved.
When we demolished our bar, which we did because we moved, as you might have remembered from the last podcast episode, we took a picture of the back bar and we had it printed up as a photo backdrop, which I think worked pretty well. I think it looks pretty good. If it weren't for the wrinkles, you might even be persuaded that it's the real thing. And the fact that it's a little bigger than life size.
Yeah, the bottles are bigger than my head, so the scaling didn't quite work out
Chris
so
has a
well.
big head. Like,
I got a giant head.
You
so
should know that.
There you go.
Know that about him. So today is our very first podcast that we're recording in our new house, in our new space. Chris is working on building the real bar today.
Bar 2.0.
2.0.
Yep.
So definitely follow us on Instagram or Facebook. We're going to be updating the stories with videos of progress along the way, so you can see as we go ahead and build that bar. But in the meantime, we're going to make it work. So
right.
I know the audio quality isn't quite the way it used to be, and I know if you're watching on YouTube, neither is the visual quality, but here we are. We're going to make it work, and I hope you can bear with us until the next fully built out bar is ready to go.
Fingers crossed. Should be soon. This is episode number 157, and a few weeks ago we started asking bartenders a very specific question, and that question is, what is the hardest part about bartending?
This guy's had a lot of coffee.
A
lot of coffee. When we started asking this question, I had some expectations. I thought people would come back and say the hardest part of bartending was, having to work nights and weekends. It was trying to get to sleep after a crazy shift. I thought people were going to say that difficult customers. I thought people were going to say all these things were going to be the hardest part, but actually that's not what people said at all. And so what we thought is that today we would dive into the 3 top hardest parts of bartending that people came back with, and see if maybe we can offer some advice for making them a little bit better. So
yeah, and these are all things that I know through my career, probably every bartender has faced, and myself included. So I think this really does kind of a really good job of kind of encapsulating kind of a universal pain point for a lot of bartenders.
I suspect so. So the 3 things we're going to talk about today, just so you know what's coming. The first and absolute top question from anybody was how frustrating it is and difficult it is to remember all of the cocktail recipes.
So many cocktail recipes.
Absolutely. So that was the first one. The next one was the frustrations of dealing with interpersonal politics among the staff.
Susie, you're killing me. Oh my God. The drama needs to calm down.
I'm sorry, Susie.
Sorry if you actually are a Susie
listening
Susie
to
this.
There. I'm sorry.
It's just a random name I picked. Sorry, Susie.
The last one was the difficulty in creating a cocktail menu, either seasonally or however frequently you update. The difficulty in creating a cocktail menu that is both awesome and creative and delicious and beautiful, and also still makes sense for service and something you can keep up with on a busy Friday night. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today.
So the first section that we're going to concentrate on is probably one of the most difficult, and that is, how do you remember cocktail recipes? There's a lot of ways you could do it. Basically, the first thing is to figure out how you retain information the best. How do you learn? How do you absorb information in your own personal way?
I mean, like, even thinking back to high school, were you a flashcards person? Were you a list reading person? Are you the kind of person who just has to write stuff out over and over and over again? I mean, the real question is, how do you learn? And because I can tell you all day long to use flashcards, but if you're not somebody who learns like that, then that's not very good advice. So
Yeah,
I would say if you know how you learn best, do that.
Yeah, in high school, I used to just sleep on a pile of books, and hopefully it would like absorb into my brain. It didn't work out so well.
I don't recommend that.
So maybe a pillow of booze bottles. I don't know if that works or not.
That explains so much.
Worst pillow ever. But yeah, to your point, figure out what works not only with your learning style, but your schedule as well.
Yeah.
So for example, if you have a long commute, if you're on a train or if you're on the bus, you have a lot of downtime to really use that time to learn new recipes, new cocktails if you're starting a new bar or anything like that. So you could use that time for just making your own audio notes. Like use your phone and say, all right, walk me through how to make a Cosmo, and then have like a 10-second gap, and then go through and kind of like do a verbal flashcard.
Absolutely. There's also a lot of quiz or flashcard apps out there. A lot of them are free.
Right.
Where you can actually input your own formulas, your own recipes, and then the app will show you the front of the card and you can quiz yourself. And that's something you could easily do if you're in like public transit or something. Probably not so much if you were driving.
Right.
I recommend it. But again, an audio format might work really nicely if you're driving or that sort of thing. Another thing to consider would be just walking through it. I know that something that really helps me is like actually being physical about remembering something. Like, for example, if I need to remember to take out the milk, then it's the process of going to the fridge that helps me remember that. Well, I think similarly in this case, what you could do is either during downtime during your shift, or at home, if you have a good sense for what your back bar looks like, actually walk through the recipes, like physically walk through them.
Yeah.
Walk to where at your back bar you keep the grenadine. Walk to where at your back bar that gin bottle is. Now, obviously, there's some things you need to learn there, and maybe even take some pictures of your bar to help jog your memory if you forget. See what I did there?
Yeah.
But I think physically walking through the recipes really helps, at least it helps me, in terms of helping them stick.
Yeah, and I remember this is something that I did when I opened a brand new spot, and their cocktails were like 13 steps. I'm not kidding. They were intense. I actually mapped it out on a piece of paper. Like, okay, cool. This is what this cocktail looks like. I'm going to group these ingredients together at the well and just kind of walk through the physical process, as Julia mentioned, of like, all right, I grab this, I grab that, pour it in the glass, put them back in. Now I build the rest of my cocktails up. And just going through the mental exercise of it can really help just have a grasp on some of these drinks, because some of them can be really, really complicated and time consuming. So the more information, the more of a footprint, a skeleton you have in your head, the better it's going to be when you actually go through service.
Absolutely. And if you're in a situation where your whole bar program is learning new cocktails together, I think that's actually great, because you could actually do a lot of things together. One of the things Chris mentioned is creating a cheat sheet. He like manually laminated it with like packing tape stuck to the front and the back. Genius. And just stuck it above his ice well. And so I think that really helps for like day 3.
Right.
When you're like a couple days in, you have it mostly memorized, but like, I know I forgot something.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always the worst kind of when you're knee deep in people and somebody calls out one recipe you just can't remember for the life of you. Sometimes you just need that little jog, mental jog. And all you have to do is look at that cue card that's printed up. And it's not customer facing, so the customer is never going to know that. You just need that one little helping step. But obviously you want to get past that, because if you have it there 2 months later, the manager is going to be like,
really? Maybe
you should just spend the time and memorize the recipe. Yeah, that'd be great.
It shouldn't be a crutch. It should be something that if you just need it.
Right.
And similarly, if your whole bar program is learning at the same time, I know one thing Chris has mentioned before is to actually bundle your bottles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you've got custom ingredients that are only for one recipe. Maybe you put the 3 things that this recipe needs together here, and the 3 things that this recipe needs together here. So there's actually like
a physical location, right? Yeah. Absolutely. And this is a good way to collaborate with people too. Instead of saying this is the way we're going to do it, ask them what makes sense. Where is the bottle positioning going to work out best? Yeah. And it's iterative. Don't get married to that first version of it. It's something that every couple of days you may change something. But make sure you get the rest of the team on board, or else it's just going to be mayhem and people setting up in the wrong order and
don't
just
go
nobody's
moving stuff
agreeing.
Around and not telling people.
Yeah, that's the worst. Because to one of the points we made earlier, this is a very physically oriented job. Muscle memory is a big component of being fast. So the minute you throw one thing off, you don't have those reference points to kind of really lean on anymore. So it's going to just slow down your entire team. So make sure everybody's on board, everyone knows where everything is, and then kind of just revamp slightly over time and get everybody on the same page with that.
Absolutely. And I think the last tip that I would have, and this is something that Chris brought up, is just get familiar with cocktail families. This is a concept that I'm starting to see really pop up a lot across the bar community as a whole. And that's because it's a great concept. And the fact of the matter is, a sour is like 50% of the cocktails out there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's some basic like formulas for cocktails. And if you get to know what those formulas are, you can glance at a recipe and say, oh, well, this is just a cranberry lemon drop.
Right.
It may be called something different, but now I have a frame of reference because I know how to make a lemon drop. All I have to remember is what's different.
Right. And it's all about balance at that point, right? You have the framework. You know that a sour is booze, citrus, and sugar. Now it's all about, okay, now if I split it and modify it slightly, okay, cool. I'm still achieving this one balance, but now I just know how to manipulate the ingredients a little bit more. So it just has a mental framework that you could wrap your head around instead of having to learn 1,500 cocktails. There's about 6 or 7 cocktail families, and the permutations are limitless. Like that's a million cocktail recipe variant right there.
It's so much easier to memorize that starting point, and then all you have to remember is what's different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would definitely start with that. Wouldn't it be great if bartending was just about great customer service, awesome experiences for your guests, and making great drinks?
Yeah, take the customers out. It'd be awesome without that.
That's true. What if it was just about making great drinks? Awesome.
Just kidding.
Unfortunately, office politics seem to play a lot into how much you can stay in your job.
Yeah.
And so that's something we definitely wanted to touch upon today. It's all of the sort of politics and interpersonal stuff that goes into being a bartender.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most critical ones, one of the biggest ones, is challenges with your manager. Management can absolutely affect every aspect of a bar program. And it usually starts at the top down. So if they're in a bad mood, it's going to ripple through the staff. If they're just kind of negative in general, that will definitely have a huge effect on the staff. So knowing your manager and kind of what kind of is their pet peeves can set you up for success on your shift.
I mean, it sounds a little bit silly, but if you know that Joe is working today and he cares a lot about your mise en place being clean, maybe spend a little extra time making sure your mise en place is clean. Like maybe it's not worth the hassle. Right.
And this is something that at any new bar, I try to kind of chime in on, like, what are those things that are going to set my management team off? And every time I get on shift, I figure out who's on the management side and just focus on making sure their one pet peeve is totally taken care of. So that way, halfway through service, they're not, sitting in the pickup window going, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. Just, it makes your shift a lot easier.
Right. And I mean, unfortunately, not every manager is a great manager, but it's also a really hard job. We've talked a lot about this before. One of the things that I think I tend to forget sometimes is how much that managers have on their plate. It's not just like sitting there wagging their finger at you. They've got an entire bar program to look at and an entire staff to look at. And one of the things that I think a lot of people overlook is that communication step. For example, I've heard bartenders come to me and frustratedly say things like, my manager is so cheap, he won't pay for me to go to an education event. And so I asked them, well, have you asked for that? And the answer is no. It's always no. It's very rare that people have actually asked for the things they want. And yet they're frustrated they're not getting them. So I get not every manager is somebody you can just go and chat with, but I would say that in general, most managers do care about you being happy because they don't want you to go anywhere. Yeah,
and I think this is a big topic. I don't know if we've actually covered this in a previous podcast or not, but being your own advocate.
Yeah.
What's going to make you happy? What's going to make you move through your career, be engaged, have more fun? Because if you go to a conference, that really does help, for me anyways, helps me kind of get my creative juices flowing. And that absolutely kind of is a benefit to the business. Not only that, but when I go, I usually come back and have to kind of give a talk about what I learned, some of the big points. So that way the entire staff gets a benefit of someone going to these conferences. But to Julia's point, be your own advocate. Know what you want and ask for it. And maybe they can't give it to you right then and there, but it could be something like, all right, I can't give it to you now, but in 6 months from now, let's set up a plan and a roadmap to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. I mean, if your manager doesn't know that you want a promotion, they may not even have you in line for it.
Right.
You know, if you tell your manager, look, what I really want is I want to work. I mean, in Kristen's example, I want to work the day shift.
Right.
Or maybe you really want that Friday night shift. Maybe you were looking to gear for the lead bartender position. Again, let your manager know, and they may come back with, well, I can't do that because X, Y, and Z. But then what you can say is, great, how can we work together to solve this problem?
Yeah.
Or you can at least understand the constraints they're operating under and keep an eye on it and ask again in 6 months. You got to be your own advocate, because that manager can't advocate for all 20 people at the same time.
Right, absolutely.
You've got to fight for yourself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's also a reality of this whole scenario too, that sure, you want to be that key bartender on a Friday night, but maybe you're just slow. Maybe you're really slow and you just don't know it.
Yeah.
So be open to suggestions on how you can increase your performance, things that you need to develop personally to get the things that you want. It's a good conversation to have. Just go in with an open mind.
Yeah, definitely. And some managers are just terrible. I don't think we can not say that, right?
No, it's absolutely true.
Some managers are just terrible, and maybe they don't care about you, or they don't put in the effort, or whatever reason. Sometimes you're just going to be in a position where your managers stink. And if that happens, again, you got to look out for yourself. And I mean, I would say put your head down and do the work.
Right.
Be the best bartender you can be.
Under your current scenarios.
Under current circumstances. And then maybe start looking elsewhere. I mean, the worst case scenario, you have just made yourself a better bartender.
Yeah. No, it's true. And this is one of the biggest complaints in our industry is my management team sucks. And I get that. I was a terrible manager for a very long time. It's a whole new skill set. And there's a lot of things you need to develop within yourself to become a really, really good manager. So it's a learning curve, and
we're all learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So,
but again, you may need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you spent that time investing in your work ethic, investing in your skills, it's just going to put you in a better position to move somewhere else. And by the way, one last side note: if you are moving somewhere else, go ahead and ask some questions about the management.
Right.
You don't want to be what do they say, out of the pot and into the fire. Make sure that you actually don't hate the management at the new place, if at all possible.
So the next thing about like management or workplace politics and diplomacy is your peers. I mean, that can have a huge effect on your mood, about how much you can actually get done, how much you can put into customer service, your peers around you. So this is a big one as well.
I think there's two really big problems in our industry. Well, in every industry. There's two problems with humans.
That's all, just two.
If you work with puppies, you're probably good and they want your job. But the first is negativity. I think that bartending as a whole can be a really hard job. And a lot of people respond to that by just becoming really negative people.
Right.
Unfortunately, by reflecting that negativity, it just makes it worse. We actually did a whole podcast on this topic. It was number 153,
I think.
So mixologytalk.com/153 if you want to go in more depth there. But I mean, I think the moral of the story here is this is going to sound really trite, but don't let it get to you.
Yeah.
Do the work and really don't let that negativity get to you. Be the voice of positivity, because people like that. People like to have a positive person around.
Yeah.
And so if you can avoid perpetuating that negativity in your bar, everybody's going to benefit.
Well, and as a bartender, we have a lot of experience with this, because when it's customer facing, we try to flip them, right? We try to take all that energy and kind of make them in a better mood. So applying the same kind of techniques and same things that you're using on your customers to your coworkers could really, really help. Like basically figure out what they like. What are they into besides, being negative, because when you start talking about things people are passionate about, all of a sudden they light up. Yeah. And they get super excited to share kind of some of the things they're working on. you might have no interest in it at all, but all of a sudden this person's now in a good mood. They can come to you and talk and get excited, and it's a whole different atmosphere than somebody saying, "Oh, I hate this job. Can I go home? Oh, can I get cut?"
Yeah,
like it gets kind of toxic.
And it breaks the cycles.
Right.
I think just by like sort of cutting that off, you can prevent it from spiraling worse.
Right.
And on a similar note, the other problem that you may have if you don't work with puppies on a day-to-day basis is gossip.
Oh my God. Did you hear what Susie said?
He just really wanted to do that voice again.
I know. I love it.
If you want to hear lots and lots of Chris doing that voice, you should listen to our podcast on the topic of gossip. Which was number 108. Mixologytalk.com/108. You have been warned.
Yeah.
But
why would he wear that? Does he think he looks good in that? Oh my God. That's it.
I have no words.
The whole episode was like that.
The whole episode. That's true. And on second thought, just don't bother.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, the message here is the same thing. Like the trick with gossip is to cut it off with you. I mean, the thing about our industry is it's all about reputation. You do not want the reputation for being a gossip.
Right.
And so you just got to stop the gossip with you. And by that, I just mean stonewall it. If somebody comes to you telling you all about Susie, then just say, "Oh, okay." And don't spread it.
Right.
And don't perpetuate it. And don't encourage it. And I think the thing about gossip is if there's no interest, if there's no excitement that comes out of it, it just dies.
Right.
And so that would be the thing that I would say in a gossipy environment. Gossip perpetuates negativity.
Don't feed it. It's like a stray cat that comes to your door. If you feed it, you're never going to get rid of it.
And you're going to get kittens.
Nobody wants gossip kittens.
Nobody wants gossip kittens. Nobody. So again, I mean, the moral of the story is kind of the same theme here, and that it just comes down to doing the work and really cutting off the negativity with you. I mean, if we all just worked really hard at sort of ending the negativity and not reflecting it and not gossiping and all this, I think that, you know, we don't need everybody to be positive. We just need a certain number of us. And I think the whole industry could really be a more positive place.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things is instead of like sitting in a pickup window talking to a person about gossip, spend more time with the customers you have, even if it's only one customer in front of you. Spend more time with them, getting to know them. It's better customer service. Mm-hmm. It's going to make you more regulars, and it's going to kind of shut the window on the negativity and the gossip. So if you're dealing with this, just turn your cheek. Just go a different direction and spend your energy and your time on your customer, which we should be doing anyways, right?
And again, I think that this is the same punchline here as with the management discussion, and that is like if you spend your time not perpetuating the negativity and instead just focusing on being a really great bartender, again, the worst case scenario is you become a better bartender, and if you have to leave that bar where you work now, you have just created a better reputation for yourself. You've created better skills. You're a better bartender. It should be easier for you to get into a place where you really want to be.
Absolutely.
The last frustration that we heard a lot of was the difficulty in creating cocktails for the menu. I think that all of us appreciate how much fun it can be to create a 17-step cocktail with 4 homemade ingredients and, you know, a hand-carved garnish and all this stuff. That can be a lot of fun, and you can make something really incredible, but it's not something you can make 14 times in an hour on a Friday night.
Yeah, it is all about scalability and repeatability and consistency, which can be hard.
Exactly. And I know this is something that Chris struggled with a lot when he was running the bar program at a place in San Francisco, is that, you know, how do you find that sweet spot between making something that's creative and unique and amazing and memorable and also something that really makes sense in a high volume service setting? Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that really helped me out. And, you know, without going too far down this rabbit hole, one of the big things was just creating ingredients at scale. So instead of doing like really boutique like stuff and, you know, handmade cocktails to order for every single person, there's a time and a place for that, and there's some great bars doing that kind of stuff. But if you're going volume, if you're doing a high volume, you need to create ingredients that just work in large batches, so you're not spending all of your time in the kitchen.
Right.
So things like syrups, making large amounts of syrups and purees, infusions. You know, if you can spend one day a week or one day every 2 weeks producing ingredients, then that's a lot better than coming in every day for 2 hours before your shift
Mm-hmm.
to try and get ingredients out the door and ready for service.
There's probably an element of that in terms of like not only making ingredients that you can make large batches of, but making ingredients that can stick around a little bit longer.
Right, exactly. So things that will actually like be in a fridge for a while, or you can freeze and pull out the day before, stuff like that is really, really big for freeing up your time to be in the bar instead of like producing ingredients for the bar. That's always fun. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but that doesn't make me my money. My money is going to be serving cocktails in front of people. That's where I get the most enjoyment out of it anyways.
Right.
So
I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say like some great examples also might be something like a vanilla syrup, where not only is it an amazing homemade syrup, but it's also something you might be able to use in 2 completely different cocktails.
Absolutely.
And the more that you can sort of cross-utilize ingredients, of course, then you're going to see a lot of benefit there too. So you mentioned vanilla syrup, fruit purees you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think herbs in general are a good place to go.
Yeah.
Rosemary, basil. I mean, I think herbs are just in general something that we're seeing a lot on cocktail menus.
Mm-hmm.
And honey ginger, that was the one that you mentioned that I was like, man, that makes me thirsty.
Yeah, honey ginger syrup is so flexible. You can use it in so many different base spirits. It's just a good one to have in your back bar, and then work it into a couple of classic cocktails or seasonal cocktails on your menu, and it's always going to be around, and you can use it in many, many different applications. So just think about it like that, like where else can I use these products instead of just this one thing, so you're not creating 18 syrups to support your cocktail menu. Just try to pare down, keep it simple. Like you might even be able to use a little bit of vanilla syrup and a little bit of a puree, and all of a sudden you have a whole new cocktail that you can use.
Right.
So just cross-utilizing your ingredients as much as possible definitely helps.
Right.
So the other thing is have a basic kind of framework, a formula for your cocktail menu. This is something that I discovered a little bit later in my career, but is really, really beneficial in so many areas. So what I mean by a framework is, say, my menu is going to consist of 2 sours. One of them is going to be egg white. One of them is going to be a standard. A Negroni riff, a highball or 2. Like that's my framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll plug and play base spirits and different flavors based off of that kind of framework. One of the benefits later on that really helped me was to forecast my sales. So if I had that same framework from the last year, I could look in my next year, like if I'm making my menu for the next coming fall, I can look at my previous fall's menu and predict essentially how much of each product I'm going to sell. So there's a lot of benefit to having a framework to your cocktail menu.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a template to work off of and use in your analytics to forecast as well.
Exactly. It's so much easier to start with to tackle a brand new cocktail by saying, okay, I got to make a highball, than it is to start with like, okay, I got to make a cocktail.
Right.
Like, at least you've got a head start and you've got a general framework to start with. So that definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having a map of all the flavors that you get to work with for the fall or the summer, for example, and saying, okay, cool. Watermelon, I don't think is going to work in a sour, but maybe in a highball, I could do like a watermelon Collins or something like that. So then you can kind of to match all the ingredients to particular cocktail families, and you're off to the races. It kind of almost writes itself at that point.
It almost writes itself.
Almost. It's that easy.
It's just that easy. We're done.
It's never that easy.
It's never that easy. The last thing to consider is a little bit counterintuitive, especially in the sort of age of craft homemade ingredients. Sometimes you might want to consider buying stuff.
Yeah.
When it comes to purees, when it comes to syrups, buying these pre-made ingredients. Nowadays, there's actually really good quality ingredients out there. That's something that's very different than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I probably would not have recommended this.
You couldn't find a good pomegranate or
exactly
syrup to save your life.
Exactly. And so nowadays, you actually can find good quality ingredients, and they might have a cost associated with them. But what I would say is do the math. Because if you're going to be sitting there clocking in for another 8 hours every week, producing syrups, that might be a heck of a lot more expensive than buying the top of the line stuff.
Yeah.
If you actually do the math, considering your time cost, you got to work it all in, and you may find out that it's actually cheaper. Yeah,
and this is something that I don't think enough bars do. I don't think they analyze, all right, where am I spending my time? Because as Julie mentioned, there is a cost associated with that, and especially as minimum wage starts to climb across pretty much every market right now. There's a cost associated with producing these goods, and if it doesn't make sense, then there's a better option out there, right? So definitely look into buying high quality ingredients to support your bar program.
Map it out.
Yeah, which means you're not doing that kind of work, and you can spend your labor hours somewhere else.
So hopefully today's episode will help alleviate some of the things that you find really difficult behind the bar. But I also wanted to mention one more thing before we go away. There was one other comment that came up a couple of times and really sort of hit home for me. And that was a couple of bartenders who said the hardest part of bartending was feeling unappreciated. And I think the reason that hit home for me was that I just remember when Chris was working behind the bar. And this is just straight to the core. That was the biggest, hardest, deepest thing. And I think maybe it's because bartending as a career is not respected the way other jobs are, or maybe it's just the fact that we often tend to deal with people who are, at the low points of their day. I don't really know the reason why bartending ends up feeling so unappreciated, but it's something I wanted to call out because I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think there was a couple things for me that really helped. As Julie mentioned, this is something that really kind of weighs on you over time. And it's just where you want to focus on and where you find a reward out of. So for me, a lot of the time it was just pure money. Like, honestly, if I was kind of feeling down, I would look down and be like, holy crap, I just made a ton of money. Today was a good day.
That helps.
I mean, at the end of the day, it will help, right?
I mean, it's not something I'm going to post on Instagram with a motivational, calligraphy for me.
Right, exactly.
It's true. Maybe making a ton of money just makes your day a little bit better, and that's okay.
Right, exactly.
But I think the other thing is that I think people do appreciate you. I just don't think we talk about it a lot in this industry. First and foremost, your regulars appreciate you, or else they wouldn't keep coming back.
Right, it's true. I'm sure every bartender can tell a story about regulars they've built over the years that have turned into friends, who've turned into lifelong friends, and all of a sudden, this place that they would come for a drink turned into something so much more, and there's something so satisfying and rewarding about that. Just building those relationships in your community really is very, very satisfying.
And I think we as humans always tend to really focus our energy on the negative. And so if we have a bad customer interaction or a bad interaction with our manager or our mother-in-law or whatever, that really sticks. But what I would say is to look around at all the people who do appreciate you. I appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
If we didn't appreciate you, we wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And I mean that, as corny and dorky as it sounds. But other bartenders appreciate you. I think that's, find a community of people who do appreciate you. Maybe it's in your local market, maybe join your local USBG, or find a community of bartenders. Maybe it's online. You can come and join us on our Facebook group. That's abarabove.com/group. We'll take you straight there. But I think the moral of the story that I wanted to get at here is that a lot of people do appreciate you, but we just don't talk about it enough.
Yeah. And honestly, I think one of the other things that really helped is to have something outside of the bar world that I was working in that really helped, like a hobby or an interest that kind of takes your mind off of work for a minute and just kind of gives you a little bit more creative energy. For me, it was building this business. Also, woodworking has kind of been one of those new things for me. So finding something that really excites you and kind of fuels you creatively outside of the bar community. The more well-rounded you are, the more interest you have, you're going to be able to talk more knowledgeably with customers about different areas and stuff too as well. So selfishly, take care of yourself. Find something that really excites you and have fun.
So hopefully today's episode has helped a little bit with some of the common pains of bartending. I know that there's a lot of reasons why it's a tough job, but there's also a lot of reasons why it's a pretty awesome one too.
Yeah.
So if we have missed anything, either if you've got frustrations that we haven't talked about, or if you have suggestions for solving these problems that we didn't mention, definitely either comment on the post in Instagram. You can find us at A Bar Above. Not very creative, but you can also come and join us in the Facebook group, like I mentioned, and that's abarabove.com/group. And then, of course, last but not least, you can always find the show notes at mixologytalk.com/157 and throw your comments there We see and read every single one.
That's true.
So thank you so much for joining us in our janky little garage setup. I hope that next time it'll be looking a little bit more polished, but I guess time will tell.
And definitely check us out on Instagram and the Facebook group, or Facebook, to see kind of the progress of this bar build.
Yes.
It should be pretty exciting.
Should be good.
Hopefully there won't be any too many
Blood.
errors.
Blood.
Yeah, blood, screaming.
Tears.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, most likely. But
We'll
yeah,
catch you
go
next
check it out.
time.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
So this is episode number 157, and a few weeks ago we started asking bartenders what the hardest part of their job was.
Yes.
Yes, tell me more. That's you.
That's you.
We're tackling the tough questions.
We're so cool.
All right. So this is episode. That was terrible.